Hello. Hello. Right, it's Rooms with Review, episode 8, and this week we have Natasha Chart, American female rights campaigner. Hello, Natasha. Come to talk to us about Florida and the sports issue. And we have Susan for Women for Scotland, is that right? For Women for Scotland, yes. Come to tell us about the horrible happenings to Marion in Scotland. Okay, so we're going to start with you, Susan. Please tell us everything that you can tell us, that you're allowed to tell us about what's happening.
So Marion Miller is our accountant. She's not part of the management of Women Scotland, but she is our accountant, and she has been charged today with under malicious communications with an aggravator of transphobia and homophobia for a series of tweets. I'm not able to say. I don't actually know what these tweets are, but I understand that they are all still up on her timeline. That Twitter, who obviously will remove just about anything women say, women have cervixes and things like that, have not removed them, so they were clearly not seen as controversial under Twitter rules. So having looked back through some of her stuff, I mean, Marion uses some quite robust language. She can be quite feisty and spicy, but they're mainly about standing up for women's rights, standing up especially for gay and lesbian rights. And I think that really it's only open to interpretation. You know, somebody has decided to read them in a certain way and they've complained on that basis. And it's quite astonishing that the police have taken it forward. A little bit of background on Marion is that she, because she shares a first name, with one of our directors, because obviously there's only one Marion in Scotland, a lot of the trans rights activists over the past year have decided they were one and the same person. When we listed for Women Scotland as a company, you have to provide an address, and so that address is our accountant's address, and Marion is our accountant, so the address is Marion's address. And late last year, about November last year, some of the SNP youth looked this up, and one individual posted this really long thread saying, "Oh, I'm not sure whether to do this because it verges on doxing." And no, it is doxing. And he published her name and her address and claimed this was the woman behind our organisation. He also looked through all the other 60 businesses listed at her address and obviously thought she was some kind of business genius, rather than realising it was an accountant with a lot of businesses listed. And he found another Marion there who ran a bar in Airdrie, and it was a Rangers football bar. So he said she's running this Rangers Unionist bar as well. And ever since then, a lot of these people have honestly believed that there are these three Marions with different surnames, different dates of birth, who are one and the same person. And I am very concerned that one of the reasons she's been pursued like this is purely malicious, people trying to get to us as an organisation, and that she's kind of fallen victim to the fact that some of these people really, really hate us and really, really are trying to shut us up. So I mean, there's not a lot I can say about the nature of the tweets, because I don't, as I said, I don't really have that information to hand, and I don't know how much we can say. We're trying to find out. Her lawyer told her she couldn't say anything. We don't know how true that is, because I think that actually it's quite shameful that you can't release the basis of this. So we are going to try and find that out, and if we get any more information on that, we'll share it. We're also going to be talking tomorrow with Marion and with lawyers, and we'll try to work out the best way to crowdfund for her legal costs and the best people to represent her going forward. And so we'll update on that and any other way that people can help. So obviously that will all go up on our Twitter, and just really say to people to keep an eye out on there to see what's going on, and hopefully I'll be able to share some more information soon, and we'll come back if and when I can.
Yes, please. And it does seem that just random women are collateral damage to get to you as well. They are very dangerous, cruel, people. Absolutely. Talking in our little group chat about the double standards of how they are treated online and how women are treated, and women. Marion McLaughlin was punched in the face. She was targeted, and it wasn't a hate crime. And poor Marion, poor Marion is being charged with a hate crime. So the message to our daughters is, what's the message to our daughters? That you can be,
you can get away with stuff against. I mean, we saw today the individual posting a picture of a gun and saying, I'm going to shoot people on the Women Won't Weesh hashtag, which is a hashtag that come through in Scotland really, really strongly. And I think part of the issue some of these people have are with the hashtags. They seem to think the hashtags are in and of themselves problematic, and that because there've been quite a few comments on that today on Twitter. Yeah, I mean, so you've got individuals saying, I'm going to shoot women. and we actually had a thread up the other day, and there's been more and more stuff every day about all these things people are saying. Oh, it's Pride Month, kill a turf, punch a turf, kick a turf in the teeth. And so all these people saying all this stuff, but that's allowed, and then the police are pursuing this. And I think that when one of the things that I thought when I look back through Marion's tweets that are up is that in order to interpret those as being in any way transphobic, you would have to really, really hate women. You would have to really think
Absolutely.
that women talking about their rights was so evil.
Do you not
think
do you believe that I think these, and it has been men putting the gun things up and threats, these men live in an environment where it's perfectly okay, it's acceptable, this is fine, because not have the left saying we are against female rights phobia, do they? That no one that I know of, the students, the politics, they don't stand up for the women's meetings that are attacked and women physically. So these men, it's fine. They're allowed. They are allowed to do it, and that's why they're doing it.
Yeah, and well, yeah, basically they get out of jail free card for the men, and I'm depressing. It's really depressing because I thought we'd moved beyond this as a society. And of course, in Scotland, we had the hate crime bill last year, and people like Diane Lamont and Elaine Smith and Jane McAlpine and Jenny Mora, Pauline McNeill argued really passionately, saying you have to protect women. You can't set up this hierarchy and then leave out the people who get the most abuse. And of course, that's what they did. And then you look at this kind of behaviour and you think, this is politically motivated, and it is hugely convenient for these people that women are not, because I think that, looking at what some of these people have tweeted who are closely connected to some of the inner circles of the SNP, you could really go back and accuse a lot of them of sexism. I mean, there were people who are putting targets around Jane McAlpine's face last year. There's the guy who has been in court, sent Joanna Cherry some really, really horrible stuff. But it has to get to that point where it is really, really horrible. I mean, Patrick Harvey was retweeting articles a while back about Joe McAlpine, weekly wanker, and saying all sorts of things about her. And he's a member of the Scottish Parliament. Mm-hmm. So the stuff that people who are really high up and really connected, I think the then boyfriend of Alan Smith posted screenshots of appeals that Joanna had made to Alan, saying, please, can you stop? Your boyfriend's saying this stuff about me. And he just posted the screenshots up on Twitter and was kind of, ha, 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 this is really funny. So these people have, yeah, and then they go after a woman for pretty much nothing.
Yeah, for standing up for female rights. Natasha, do you know about Women Don't Weesh? Is that the hashtag? Women won't.
That is the hashtag, yeah.
I've seen it, yeah. And it was I had to have it explained because that was a term that I wasn't familiar with, and then someone explained it means women won't shut up. Is that
correct? That's
right. So I didn't, but it's pretty clear, obviously, women in Scotland talking back to all of this, but it strikes me listening to you say all this that it's sort of the real life application of the progressive stat concept that they were using at the Occupy rallies back in 2011, where it's like you list somebody's identities and then the person who has the most oppressed identities gets to speak first. And the Occupy movement would do that, for everything. Like, and if you were like a straight white guy, you were at the bottom of the stack every time for speaking. What should not be too shocking in retrospect is a lot of the straight white guys who were involved with Occupy later began to identify as women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have described actually somebody in Scotland who is quite notorious. You've just somebody who was always the person saying to everybody else, you have to shut up and let the most marginalized speak, and then realized that he put himself right down at the bottom, and that is entertainingly exactly what has happened.
They have jumped themselves back to the front of the speaking queue, and to the oppression. If you're going to rank it like that and be very rigid that this is all class, like as they define it, this is the result that you're going to end up with. And then if you also apply the concept of, punching up is always righteous. If you have redefined yourself as being at the absolute bottom, you get to punch up at everybody. And nobody else is allowed to see or feel sympathy for the people you are punching up at. And so these men have defined women as being up, as above them in the oppression hierarchy. And so whatever they do is justified. And it's simple logic, but this is always the result.
Yeah. Yes, no, I think it's a really good description, and I think it's a really good example of what's been happening.
It's too bad it's just awful though. It's horrible.
Yeah, and the other thing about Marion is, which I know she's highlighted, but she has young twin boys who are severely autistic. So a lot of her concern has been for these two children, and that was she said one of the first things when they called her and said she got to come in was what would happen with her boys. She needed to make arrangements for them, and the police officer at the time said, we'll get social work in, which all the social workers have subsequently said, no, that wouldn't happen. So it read like a threat that we'll take your children away. And certainly I think that was how a lot of people saw it. And I think that's how most of us would see it if somebody said that. And then, of course, it dragged on. She had 2 cancelled meetings, and it almost felt like they were playing games with her and playing games with her family and playing games with these very, very vulnerable children. That you have these extremely vulnerable children, and who really should be, people who are in that category of needing support, needing help, and yet you have these adults who, I don't know, but I think they're probably fairly secure and well off and middle class, privileged, yeah.
Privilege.
Attacking a woman who's holding down a job and trying to look after these kids.
It is
Can I ask,
Go on.
if she's found guilty of this, what would the consequences be? Will she be put in prison for it?
Well, I saw the Times today were reporting that it could carry a sentence of up to 2 years.
Jesus. Okay.
And
It's quite shocking.
Yeah.
Shocking. We're in dangerous times, aren't we?
Yeah.
Really. And this is before, because a lot of people have got a little bit confused because we had the hate crime stuff and they said, is this to do with the hate crime bill? And this is before the hate crime bills come into force in Scotland. So this is under the old malicious communications with an aggravator.
I assume this was part of the hate crime bill.
It is under hate crime. It is under hate crime, but it's under
But not the new bill.
Not the new one. So in some ways that's not changed too much, because the problem with the new one is that you have the stirring up. So we're not sure what would count as stirring up. But what this tells us, which is quite troubling, is that my view would be, for something to be a malicious communication, it would have to be a malicious communication in and of itself. But it seems that whatever these tweets are, somebody has taken offence to what was said or what they inferred to be in these tweets, whose meaning is not obviously apparent, as I said, at least from what I've seen of her timeline. So somebody has made an assumption, and so based on that assumption, they've said this is a threat, and then they've added the aggravator on top of that, and it's the aggravator that's the problem. So that is only going to get worse with this new bill, because under that you can take out the malicious communication and just say you're stirring up based on your feeling. So this is going to get much, much worse for women in Scotland. This is what we said, and it's what the Police Federation said. The Police Federation said that their officers would be tied up in dealing with vexatious and petty and malicious complaints. And I think this is what this is. And they said that the police have to police by consent. And as soon as you get into a situation where the police are seen to be persecuting members of the public, trust is going to break down. So I'm not entirely, I find it astonishing actually they've taken this forward. I don't really understand what's going on and why these officers have decided to pursue this, but I'm sure some of that is going to come out as well.
I feel they've been indoctrinated and they're doing this on behalf of Stonewall. That's how I feel. And this hate crime legislation, what a cushy job that is if you're a police officer. You're not having to deal with, dangerous offenders on the street. Perfect for them. I think there's got to be a lot of police actually that just think, yeah, I want to be in that office, in the hate, the naughty word office. Like I said, you can punch a woman in the face, but say naughty word, you can tell pervy men to fuck off. And that's like the message to our daughters. You're not allowed to tell men to fuck off. Just tell online. That's the message. And also, Natasha, I don't know if you know, there's a class system in Britain, in the UK. And the social service, you don't say that to working class mums. You don't tell them. It's so frightening. I had the social service involved when we were kids in our lives, and it's a frightening thing for mums to do that. And middle doesn't really happen that much. It is working class mums that have the social service involved in their life. And the social services are stretched themselves, you know, and it's very dangerous. And this really is a message to everybody else to shut up, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I have to say I'm impressed at the ability to joke, because I mean, I think when you said that the potential penalty for this was up to 2 years in jail, like the bottom just dropped out of my stomach. I mean, that it's terrifying.
It is.
And
for something that Twitch has not even taken down. I mean, the idea that women can be, you know, there's so many women who could have reposted or commented on whatever these particular tweets, God knows, and they could come after everybody. They could come after all of us for that. And this is thought policing. This is Stasi-like behaviour. It really is. And I mean, you know, Scotland is this weird country. We're the country of the Enlightenment, but we're also the country that had we had the witch trials. It wasn't England who had the witch trials, it was Scotland. So it's also a place where there's quite a lot of darkness, especially around women. And it does feel like a witch hunt. Really feels like a witch hunt.
Well, when they went after Harry Miller, that was because he retweeted somebody else's tweet, right? Like somebody went after him, but it was because he shared somebody else's comment, like a limerick, I think it was.
Yeah.
But that's in the UK, and obviously they're in Scotland with different legislation that's been brought in. You said it's not quite brought in yet. So they have different legislation, but they are trying it here too. People are going to be watching what's happening in Scotland and loving it, and they're going to go after us, and they will, won't they? It's a message to everyone in the UK.
Well, of course, Kate Scott out with the stuff that she and everything she went through. So, and sometimes these things just drag on and on and on, and that's the other thing, that it's not even. One of the things that we said when we went to the committee was, because this was the arrogance. I mean, the sheer arrogance. There was myself and Lucy Hunter Blackburn sitting there in front of this committee, and they were mainly all men. There were quite a lot of them, witnesses. And the committee, I mean, not the committee were very fair, but and they're trying very hard, but the witnesses, mainly men, one woman from Engender, which of course is the official feminist organisation in Scotland that's really controlled by the government. They say they're not, but you know, they seem to agree with everything the government says. So, and they get all their money from the government. And Lucy and I were nearly in tears. We were saying this will be used against us. I mean, all we had at this point was raw emotion, because this was a callback from earlier sessions. And we were holding up images of Lydia Falcon and saying, you know, this is what is happening to women. These are the things that people are doing and saying about women. And we know, because we got reams of printouts from these people saying, oh great, when this comes in, we're going to go after them, we're going to report them to the police for XYZ. And obviously some of them have decided to do that. And we said, look, we've got all these people saying they are going to persecute us when you bring in this law, and you have got to do something about that. And the arrogance of these men, it's sort of, yes, yes, dear, pat you on the head, you're being a bit silly.
Is it your time of the month? You know, it's the sort of thing that went through their mind.
Yes. And they said, if you've not done anything, you won't be found guilty. And we said that is not the point, because the point is leading up to that court date. And of course, what is happening to Marion is a perfect example of that she's had all this stress, these delayed dates, this threat to her children. She's now got all this hanging over her. There's the cost. So it's not the fact you get to court and then they go, this is ridiculous, and throw it out. It's the fact that in order to do that, your life gets torn apart and your bank account gets emptied. And
Absolutely.
hopefully, at least they will see that what we were saying was true. That we weren't just being hysterical women.
Mm.
And that's kind of the only upside I can see to it. That maybe, just maybe, this is what we needed to prove our point.
Well, thank you
And
very
that's chilling enough for middle class people. But what you were saying about, you know, the class divide, and of course, I mean, we have that in America too, though it's more racialized, but obviously not exclusively racialized. I mean, if you're someone who's barely making ends meet, how are you supposed to get proper defense for that? And then if you can't get proper defense for it, you end up with something on your record and you don't have a college degree, you don't have some kind of, you know, independent professional training to fall back on, your work history is destroyed. You're never going to get hired for anything again.
Yeah. And that's why, you know, when you're in front of the police and they're almost trying to draw this out of you, well, wouldn't you say this is, and you know, I'm not saying this is what happened with Marion, but it's a scenario you can envisage, that the police are sitting there going, well, why did you say that if you are not a horrible transphobe or a homophobe? And yeah, there are probably going to be some people out there who will go, do you know what, I just want to get out of here. I just want to take a warning and disappear, or take a fine. But as you say, that's enough to destroy somebody's life.
Yeah.
I have family with autistic children, and I think it should be deemed a hate crime that, you know, the help is so little. It's pitiful, the help that parents and single mothers of autistic children, hate crime, schooling, and there's also the threat of social services for these mums as well. It happened to my family because they're trying to fight for, you know, services, and so they're seen as, you know, what's the word? The too much trouble, the trouble mums. Yeah. So I imagine that Marion has been through the same system and the same sorts of accusations, just fighting just for her children. So, and now she's doing that for female rights. So I think she's very, she just has our full support. If there are crowdfunders for barrister, you know, we will be digging deep. Sorry, I'm getting all tongue-tied. Digging deep.
Thank
you know
you.
We will, and crowdfunder comes up in the next few days. We'll put it up on the links on our Twitter feed, won't we?
Brilliant, thank you. No, that's really appreciated.
Is there anything else?
We've
Sorry, go ahead.
Chloe asked, is there anything else we can do?
I don't know of anything at the moment, as I say, because I believe Marion and Marion are still in the pub. So
It's for them.
I think they're largely pickled in gin and not making any decisions at the moment. But we will try and get something out.
We owe them more gin. We owe them more gin. This is so brave of her, and she didn't. And we're horrified. We're really horrified. Now, Graham Linehan has wrote a post, and we know, Susan, that you can't be with us to talk about this. So we're going to briefly talk. And
shall I can just go off camera or mute.
I tell you what. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
yes.
we can.
Hi. Do you know what? From technical difficulties, I'm going to come in and take part because fellow guests have fallen out with technical issues. Susan, you have to get off now, I believe. Yeah,
thank you for that. That was good to chat through.
But don't go, Susan. You just hang around, so you don't have to go.
I will. Yeah, no, I'll hang around and I'll come back to hear the.
Solidarity to Marion.
I'm just going to say Graham Linehan, Natasha, you must know who he is. He's published a piece and he's named David Paisley, the gay rights activist, Scottish gay rights activist, big sexist Offhol, who's done this to Marion. He's the one that's gone to the police, and it was him. So this is on a published piece, has said that the tweet in question is a ribbon. It's a suffragette ribbon that David Paisley has said is a noose. So he's made out that the suffragettes are the that I know it's just that's what we're being compared to. What Marion's being compared to is the KKK.
I read that. I read that post this morning. So it's just mad. I mean, I looked at the picture. It doesn't look anything like a noose. Like, even for someone who is, you know, I'm an American, and I wouldn't necessarily have looked at that and immediately thought suffragette women. But I never would have looked at that and thought, yes, this is a noose, because, I mean, as you may have heard in news at various points, like, there are people who hang up nooses as political hate speech here in the U.S. now and again, and
it's
that
been
does not
done
look like that.
women. It's been done to TERFs. There's been like lynch a TERF. We've seen it against us.
Yeah. Well, someone brought a paper mache guillotine to a Meghan Murphy event in Canada as well. I've definitely seen that. You know, what's interesting though is, like, we discussed the effects on autistic kids, and which is, you know, not obviously, but that autistic kids grow up, and, you know, when you're an adult on the spectrum, it's hard to moderate yourself, not to be really blunt, and to just say what's on your mind, and to say what you see. And it's like a lifelong process of being like, no, don't say that, you know. But it's hard, even as a grown person who's kind of like integrated yourself into society. And what trans activists are demanding of everyone, really, with these gender identity policies, that, you know, it's a different policy in every country, but they all play out the same way. They're demanding a really complicated form of social lying, and autistic people are really bad at that.
Well,
very hard.
Another reason why Marion has got involved in this issue is because she said she doesn't want her autistic children, you know, literally believing everything that they see online. My children are not the most strangest things online, especially around the gender identity, and they believe it, and they're not autistic. So they're not. I understand that autistic children literally will take it as an identity. They will almost, because you know, they will try and make it part of them, because and I can see it in children that are not autistic.
There is the issue of maybe being a little more likely to believe it or to buy into it, but I would suspect, from my recollections of being a teenager, that one of the most appealing things that it offers is a sense of community and popularity. Because for those same reasons of, like, being really blunt and not good at complicated social interactions, autistic young people, anyone on the spectrum, you don't tend to have a lot of friends as a young person. You're almost certainly not going to be one of the popular kids. You're a lot more likely than other kids to sit alone at lunch. And so I think a big part of the appeal is, you know, when you're lonely as a teenager, you're going to feel like there's something wrong with you, and you're going to want somebody to fix it. And this offers the promise. Like, I think most of us have probably seen the slides where, you know, these gender activist doctors sort of promise it as a cure for autism. Or, you know, they'll tell these young girls who are awkward and have unusual interests, and the other girls don't want to talk about the things they want to talk about. Oh, your problem is you're really a boy. And, you know, offering that, you know, sort of a ladder out of social isolation, like, here, let me help you. I mean, that's like offering, you know, Christmas and a puppy. It's
Well,
just it's evil.
exploiting teenagers, aren't they? It's exploitation of our of naive teenagers. I'm happy with identity, actually. I don't mind that. It's we just know where that leads to. It's when they have the mastectomies and the surgeries and the puberty blockers. That's where it goes too far. But playing around with identity, just talking about it or saying, not too, I'm pretty chilled with that.
But we used to have different identities. When I was growing up, you were either a punk, a metalhead, an emo, or a goth. Like, I went metalhead, and that was my identity. The worst that happened is I got some piercings that I still like, and if I don't like, I can take them out. It's not the end of the world. Now identity is completely changing your body and being on medication for the rest of your life. It's crazy. Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. I think it's really interesting. I just think it's really interesting the collapse of alternative identities into transgender identities. What other permeations we have now? I feel like all the kids that used to be goths and emos, all the people that felt excluded from society, have now been co-opted in this movement and are part of a global family. Like, it appears to be rebelling against society's norms, but yet at the same time you are doing exactly what all the major corporations of the world seem to be wanting you to do, like Vogue pushing out articles about non-binary identities. It's the co-option of alternative communities within a like an agenda that is just nothing to do with what I don't know. Like, punk doesn't mean agreeing with 99% of the corporations on the planet.
You're not punk. There's rainbows all over the place because punks are hated. So we're punk.
Yeah, man, that's what it is.
Corporation of the rainbow.
Yeah.
That rainbow.
Well, but now
that rainbow leaves body parts, not a pot of gold. The thing, it smothers everything. The rainbow, and our children are taken to this, aren't they? Because they love rainbows.
Well, speaking of children, and this leading on to that, what are you discussing, Natasha, with regards to Florida?
Oh, yeah. Well, so
Sorry,
they're the eighth state to pass it. They're the eighth state to pass a bill protecting women's sports in the U.S.
Yeah.
And they passed a version that protects it through college.
Okay.
So, and it's like state-funded institutions, so that covers what we call like the Title IX civil rights, so federally funded educational institutions. Some of the states have opted only to protect like K-12, so through high school. The Florida bill, it does the full ride all the way through college, which is great. And it's interesting because the governor quoted the fact that there had been a number of polls done. And the first polls on public attitudes on these issues in the US, like more specifically than, hey, do you oppose LGBT discrimination? And of course, people are going to say yes to that in a poll. But like last year, we started polling on, do you think male athletes should be able to play in girls and women's sports? And so the governor in his press release about this noted that about 60% of the public opposes letting males play in women's sports.
Can I ask, is it a Republican or Democrat?
He's a Republican. Yeah.
Okay.
So far, overwhelmingly, it's only been conservatives who have stood up to this. There's a very tiny handful of Democrats who said anything about it at all.
Mm-hmm.
And not even all the conservatives. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh no, go ahead, Natasha. Go ahead. No, keep talking.
Oh, not even all the conservatives have opposed it. Like this year, North Dakota's governor declined to sign the bill that passed both houses of the the state legislature. So, and she issued like a watered down executive order about it. But, what you get here is you get all these multinational companies and all of these really massive nonprofits coming in, with a national reach, with millions of national followers. And they'll come in and they'll just put a huge amount of pressure on these governors. And, if you take just like Amazon, I looked these up. I don't know this off the top of my head, but like Amazon has, like, in 2020, they had $386 billion in revenue. And the state of North Dakota that same year, 52 billion. So you have they're like 6 times the size of the economy of the state of North Dakota coming in and putting pressure on the governor there. But Florida, their economy is like $935 billion in 2020. So they can stand up to Amazon and be like, nah, that's okay. Like the NCAA, which is it's our collegiate sporting authority, or the governing body, I think is the term. They can come in and they can put huge pressure on a small state like North Dakota and threaten to take their events away. And that's going to be kind of a big hit. The mayor of one of their largest towns came in and was pressuring the legislators at the discussion of the bill earlier this year not to pass it, because saying, well, if the NCAA pulls out their events from North Dakota, that's really going to hurt our town's economy. And it's not very brave, but it's also an accurate thing. Whereas, the governor of Florida can look at the NCAA and, like he was saying, like, well, the hell with their events. I think that's close to a direct quote of what he said, because, it's kind of a drop in the bucket for the Florida economy. And indeed, as more of these bills have been passed in more states, including states where sports is like a big part of public culture, the NCAA has started to back down. And they've put out a schedule of events this year that includes states that have passed these protections for women and girls sports.
Do you think that this is going to be beneficial for women moving forward and building their case against the entry of men in women's sports? Like, what is the legal consequences of this bill, and what should we be mindful of?
Well, it's almost certainly going to end up in court. The ACLU, which is, if I'm recalling correctly, it's like a $500 million institution. It's massive. They threatened to sue. Yeah, well, and that's just their national chapter. They have chapters in every state and in Puerto Rico. So every time one of these bills comes up, the ACLU is on social media all over. We're going to see you in court. We're going to sue you. And again, for small states, that can be a significant threat that some have caved to. Or like, when Montana was considering a bill, the ACLU was saying, we're going to sue you. We're going to go after your federal funding. We're going to cost your schools $230 million in funding. It's rough. So this is definitely going to end up in court.
Does that mean?
Do you think the fact that Florida is such a large state, which will help your cause because it has the ability to push back against things which will be detrimental to women's ability to access sport?
I hope so.
Well, the internet is going. Oh,
what we're doing? Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's as big. It's certainly one of our larger states, and they have a lot more economic power. Meeting a case like this in court will be less of a reach for them, and they'll probably end up, what will happen is that when this lands in federal courts, which it almost certainly will, there will end up being like a coalition, probably, because this is just how it usually works. I don't particularly know. But typically in the past, what happens is you get a coalition of interested parties will coalesce around one case or the other, and that'll consolidate in the federal courts. And if it ends up at the Supreme Court, especially if there have been, like, we have like several different federal court circuits, as it will. I think there's 11 of them. If you end up with a circuit split, like the different circuits have different decisions, the Supreme Court will sometimes choose to take one of those cases, and then everybody who's brought a similar case or has been an interested party in the lower court decisions can then apply to be an amicus curiae, to file friend of the court briefs in support, and you'll end up with like just a huge number of people on both sides submitting arguments to that one consolidated case.
Okay. So
And
this
are you
could be
writing
good
about?
for
Oh, sorry.
Not. I've been meaning to, but haven't yet. Things have been changing so rapidly. But if I do, I'll send you a link.
Yes, please. Yeah, thank you. Go on, Katie. Sorry.
No, I muted myself. No, it's. Did you know what? When with the US legal stuff, I just get so confused with all the legal systems that I feel like I have to become an expert in like US legal federal structures of things. But it sounds like it's a good thing, though. It sounds like Florida's a big state with a lot of money, and surely will this lead to something like when girls are looking for scholarship opportunities and places to go, will this potentially have an impact in terms of girls having a fair shake when they go to compete in sports? Do you think that this is significant in that regard? Like, is this a pushback in defence of women's rights to access a fair sports system?
I sure hope so. I mean, because it was just 2 boys in Connecticut took over a dozen titles from girls in state and regional track meets. And that's a whole lot of opportunities lost, that they wouldn't, that might have gone to a dozen different girls, or, I mean, even one is too many to be losing out in that way, because it's just ultimately not fair, so hopefully that will help, and especially because they are protecting collegiate sports there. I don't know. I'm glad that someone has decided to stand up for girls and women's sports and services, and it really seems like this issue, obviously there's a lot of other issues to be concerned about with the impacts of these policies, but this is one that really gets through to the average American in our, in polling and in talking to people, that like everybody can immediately understand and make the connection, like, this isn't fair. This isn't right here. You can't have male athletes competing about women. Like, this is something that a lot of people have played sports. They're sports fans. They know there aren't any women in the NFL, and there never will be, like playing, like, there's never going to be a woman quarterback in the NFL, even if there is that one who does the linebacker kicks from way behind the lines. It's just not, you get it. You understand there's that difference in size.
None of the Democrats do. I don't see the Democrat Party coming out. That's the thing. And I think, well, they're doing it for votes, clearly, but it's going to come and bite them on the bum in 10 years' time, when these kids and girls and their scholarship, and the kids that are damaged, irreversible damage, as Abigail Schreier says, and their parents are not going to vote for the Democrats because they didn't stick up for them or they didn't say anything. So that means a one-party state, surely. It's not going to the future. Whatever we say about the Republicans or the, Democrats, I don't want either as a one-party state. And so for the future, I just think, why? Oh, don't stand up for these girls. Stand up for science or reality. See the left as well standing up for reality, then it's over, isn't it? That's a one-party state. Dangerous times. My rant over.
We're exactly the same here, though. Look at our left. We have Labour, the Greens, and the Liberals, and they're all saying the same thing. And I've been a Labour member and voter my whole life, but I could not vote for them or any of the left parties at the moment. Just couldn't.
Well, it pushes back and forth, because there have been times, if you look back it's different here because we have, we don't have a parliamentary system, so it converges towards a two-party system. But those parties have flipped back and forth over time, and what usually happens when one party just, sort of implodes, something else will come along. And it seems to be almost the mathematical law of it that, if one group, if one coalition fails, some portion of them will, come up with some new negotiation. They'll come up with some new coalition. But usually it does require, some kind of pretty significant electoral defeat to come up with a coalitional realignment like that.
It feels like you have in America kind of what we have in the United Kingdom, which is a first past the post system whereby you have two political parties who nobody wants to vote for, and you end up having a debate about who do you hate the most, who do you hate the least, and I think that maybe what we're seeing with regards to transgender ideology is a failure of political representation to represent what people believe, and we're just faced with
not believe, it's reality, isn't it? It's fact.
Yes, it's fact. It's not a belief, it's a fact.
Yeah.
It seems like it's big money capture. It's donor capture of institutions. When you're looking at people who are political donors, that's a fairly small community of people. There was a lot of really intense work to win those people over to this cause, and gender activists have talked about that. And then they'll get the institutions all going along with them. You're just seeing Stonewall's diversity scheme kind of come apart this last week, where there's all of these hundreds of institutions who've been getting advice from this organization about how they should ignore women's equalities rights. We have the same thing over here with our human rights campaign has their business index that rates people for, how good an employer they are for LGBTQ diversity, and they just get their ideas out through that. They recruit everybody with this promise of here's some good PR. And, you get the donors that back all of these nonprofits, all sort of, or at least even some significant portion of them singing from the same script. And then nobody wants to get mobbed on Twitter. And then all these things just kind of come together. And before you know it, nobody can say boo. You can't be a Democrat hardly and oppose this stuff, even though it's not really popular. But it's popular on Twitter, and it's popular with donors, and it's popular with these big corporations.
It's popular with donors, and it's popular with big corporations that support Twitter, because Twitter doesn't really represent us. And they've played such a game with the language that we use in the way that we have to speak now. We're not allowed to say trans women and men, that's hateful, but opposing that belief with a gun in your face is LGBTQIA activism.
Well, that's what Chloe's going to be talking about now, is the doublespeak.
It is.
I bet Natasha. Yeah, so let's talk about doublespeak, because I've got
You got something to say? Okay, I'm gonna read this because this is about saying what you mean and meaning what you say, so I want to say it correctly. All right, so double speak is when someone distorts words or phrases, often in order to conceal the truth. The writer Edward S. Herman describes in his book Beyond Hypocrisy the principal characteristics of doublespeak. What is really important in the world of doublespeak is the ability to lie, whether knowing or unconsciously, and to get away with it, and the ability to use lies and choose and shape facts selectively, blocking out those that don't fit an agenda or program. Doublespeak is language that deliberately obscures, disguises, distorts, or reverses the meaning of words. There are 4 types of doublespeak. There are euphemisms, words used to soften the reality of situations. Example is top surgery. Jargon, which is specialized language of a trade, profession, or group. My example is cross-sex hormones, gender-affirming surgery, all that nonsense. There's gobbledygook, which is using lots of big words to confuse the audience and hide the meaning of the statement. See Judith Butler. Inflated language. Inflated language, important sounded words used to give commonplace things and events an elevated, growing appearance. So basically, anytime you see stunning and brave when a man's put a dress on. Some examples of doublespeak that I've thought of are child porn, when we mean child rape, breath play, when we mean strangulation, gender, when we mean stereotypes, transition, when we mean cosmetic surgery, and trans woman, when we mean man. Double thing is, where am I? The more we use double speak, the more we get into double think. And double think is the process of indoctrination whereby the subject is expected to simultaneously accept 2 mutually contradictory beliefs as correct, often in contravention to one's own memories and sense of reality. And that is the problem with all this. We are training our brains to disbelieve reality, and that is really dangerous as on an individual level, but on a societal level it is really scary, and we should not be engaging at all with any of this kind of doublespeak, because first of all, this why we got into this place in the first place, but we let them have woman, and we're never going to get that word back, and we just need to stop it right now because it's dangerous. Sorry.
Chloe, because when you put it in the group chat, and I'm like, oh, family fortunes, and then I can't think of anything. I was like, oh my god, I can't. But I did actually. Binder, constrictor.
Yeah.
Binding and sex workers, prostitution.
Yeah.
I do this myself. Only fans, only mans. The fans, the men. Let's just be honest. I thought. Key workers, right? I don't know if you have this, Natasha, but it was key workers. You know, they had a pass to go to work. So basically, they're the most at risk workers. They were called key workers, the most at risk workers, like bin men and nurses. Katie, isolated incident, male violence. Got to be male violence.
Yeah.
They just do it randomly. There's no reason. They just hate women for no reason, but that's not a thing.
What else did I come out with? The oh yeah, and Cadbury's cream egg. American nuclear waste. Your Cadbury's horrible stuff. That's the American dream. It tastes disgusting, Natasha. The American dream tastes disgusting. And for me,
you're being controversial there, Chinsey, aren't you?
And for me, for my kids, in a minute means that they're irritating me already. One day of half term, and I'm going to see you in about an hour. That's what. Can you come back to me in an hour? That's in a minute. So I should go away. That's what in a minute means. Go away. Can you did you think of any?
Well, I will note that the Cadbury cream egg, that cream is spelled CREME, and that's your warning that there's no cream in that thing.
It's not.
Yeah, you gotta read the labels. real careful. Read every label that comes out of this country.
Otherwise, it's nuclear waste. I swear to God, that's what you're eating, Natasha. Nuclear waste.
Well, do you know what? I would say that actually the name Cadbury's is doublespeak. Now that some American, I'm not making it anti-American, Natasha, but we were taken over by Mars a few years ago, and they literally changed all of the chocolate. So like Cadbury's cream eggs, they're not Cadbury's cream eggs. They identify as Cadbury's cream eggs, but they are literally just like some new recipe, nothing that you want to eat. And like we've come acclimatized. Do you know what I find like one of the most Orwellian movements that I've seen is the people that are trying to make out that non-meat and like soy meat is meat. It used to be a meat substitute, you know, like soy meat substitute, and they used to put that in the words. But now, if you go to the meat counter in your local supermarket, next to the meat, they have the fake meat, and it's like, I'm not an anti-vegan or what have you, like in no stretch of the imagination, but I just think that meat is meat, and wheat protein.
You don't like
filled.
the wall being pulled over your eye. Like it, do you? You just don't.
Do you know what? It's not meat. Like, we constituted soya protein with all these additives is not meat, and it just feels like there's a very surreptitious way that society is taking concepts that we all know what these things mean, and we are changing them, and we are making out like the fake is the real.
Like a man is a woman. Exactly
And
like that.
that's the big one right there.
Yeah.
You know, like we had, you know, arguments about like, oh, you know, conservatives are science denialists, you know, because of the global warming issue. And it's like, you're pretending you don't know how babies are made.
Uh-huh.
What can you even say after that? You're denying biology. You're denying something that, you know, you don't need a $50 million weather satellite to tell you that men can't have babies. That's, you know, everybody knows that. Everybody has always known that. And it's just so ridiculous.
Ash, you're going to get arrested. We'll have the Scots at your door.
You know what?
Poor Marion.
I guess I can't come to Scotland now.
Oh, none of us can.
Oh, dear.
Well, it's the end of our hour, and I just want to say thank you to Susan, and best of luck, and thank you, Natasha, for coming tonight and chatting to us.
Thank you. It was great to talk about Scottish and American politics.
Absolutely, yeah. Please come again, please. I usually tell someone then my favourite Yorkshire, even though Marion's and please like and subscribe, and we shall see you next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye.